Hello, BookTube. We're continuing with my library tour. I am now high up above puppy territory. We are coming back. We're going to be in the top shelf of this next bookcase. For those of you who are worried, I am not standing on the footstool. I am on the bed. I'm on my pre-World War I little box frame bed. And we're just going to make our way through this top shelf here and see what we have. So a couple of transverse books. We'll start with those. The first one is great. It's a great work of natural history about jellyfish. About jellyfish. This is by Julie Burwald, and it is called Spineless. This is the trade paperback. Still has the pub sheet. I've also stuck in a bunch of reviews, and it has a blurb from Open Letters Monthly, but it's not by me. It's blurred by another writer at Open Letters Monthly who got this book and really loved it. It's fantastic. I say that despite the fact that I have been stung by jellyfish many, many times. I still find them fascinating to read about. Then the next transverse book, this is... Abrams did these things years ago, and they did a whole bunch of them, and for some reason I just haven't gotten rid of this. They don't stand up to time, and they don't. This particular one doesn't have anything in it that I don't have in a million other places. They did a whole bunch of things like this. This is their little book on Vikings. But they did a whole bunch of little books like this on every subject under the sun. And they're heavily illustrated. They have lots and lots of color illustrations, and I kind of like that, but I have every Viking-related color illustration elsewhere. So I don't need really a little book. And those are the only true transverse books. So now we'll just move on. We'll just go on to the rest of the shelf. So let's see here. Okay. All right, well, we start with a winner. This is YA fiction. But you'd never know it from reading it. The best YA fiction doesn't pander, doesn't condescend, so anybody can read it. And this is by David Levithan. This is Two Boys Kissing. And it's amazing. It's amazing. I don't often tear up when I read things, but especially when I read made-up stories, when I read fiction. But this is a story of two boys and their friends preparing for a prom and dealing with who knows what and who loves who and who might have a crush on who and whatnot. In the present day, when we have fraught debates and subjects on all of that sort of thing, but we don't have anything like scorched earth in most parts. For instance, America. In most parts of America, we don't have anything like the scorched earth or the complete silence and repression that we had even a generation ago. And Levithan underscores that reality in this book in an amazing way, a way that could have gone wrong in a serious way if he were not such a talented writer. He has the story invisibly narrated and commented upon by a Greek chorus of dead men, of men who died from AIDS before the freedom of this present era. So they're watching all of this happen, and they never got a chance to be it. They never got a chance to do it themselves, to experience that kind of freedom, even when that freedom is bringing heartache and confusion to the young characters in the present-day plot. And it's harrowing, absolutely harrowing, and in the good way, in a way that you want fiction to do. It's amazing because it's YA fiction that will move the heartstrings and involve the sympathies of young readers. And maybe make them curious about a bygone era in which not only was it criminal in all 50 states for two men to kiss in public, but there was suddenly out of nowhere this plague that seemed to be affecting only gay people, and for which there was an absolutely horrible death, for which there was not even any research, much less a cure or treatment of any kind. It might interest those young people and get them to read up on that time, but it also works exactly simultaneously for people who went through that. I went through that and knew a lot of people who lost a lot of people in that era. I'm familiar with its art, I'm familiar with its literature, and it was a gut punch to read this particular literary device. And like I say, it could easily have come across as the worst kind of pandering, the worst kind. I could have easily hated it, but it's so well done. I cannot recommend it strongly enough. And I don't say that often about YA. So let's see what this next one is. Oh, great. Okay, this is David Carradine. I absolutely love him. I think he's fantastic. This thing is History in Our Time. I think we saw maybe a hardcover of this. This is a little UK trade paperback of. I mean, it has a fancy smancy title, but these are periodic pieces. So, he will be doing whatever his job is, and then he will get in the mail. Somebody will let him know there's a new biography coming out of Queen Victoria, or King Edward, or the Duke of Wales, or something like that, and he will write up a piece, a periodic piece, which is a review of that book, which is also a broader, more ambling historical discussion of that subject. And that's all that this book is. If we go through the, that's plenty. I'm not belittling the thing at all. You go through, there's a whole bunch. The whole chapter is on the beginnings of the modern monarchy that changed from the House of Saxe-Coburg to the House of Windsor. So Queen Victoria, King Edward VIII, King George VI, Prince of Wales, Princess Diana, of course. That's where the cover comes from. And then a whole bunch of other things, a whole bunch of figures from that Edwardian Victorian period that people just can't shut up about. So you have Cecil Rhodes, Winston Churchill, Lord Beaverbrook, Harold Macmillan, Florence Nightingale, even a whole piece on A.J.P. Taylor. I hear a scratching at the door. I hear a rapping, gently tapping upon my chamber door. This is the Bean feeling left out. Even if we open that door and let her in, she can't make it up this high. So she'll just have to lump it. So let's see. What is this next one? Oh, great. Fantastic. This is George Mercer's book, Spooky Action at a Distance. This is the trade paperback. And the title refers to a famous quote from Albert Einstein about quantum mechanics. And specifically about the phenomenon of quantum entanglement. That two particles will respond with the same orientation change instantaneously, even after they have been separated by, theoretically, an infinite amount of distance. They are connected somehow in a way that transfers that information, right? Because the change in your orientation is information. It happens to you. Knowing about it happening, anybody else knowing about it happening is information. You are learning that about something. And that information, as far as we can tell, is transferred instantaneously from two entangled particles, which defies light speed, among many other things. And this isn't only about that. This is all about the quantum world. It's a wonderful sort of walkthrough of the mysteries of the quantum world. Okay, I think we saw this already. This is I think this is a double. This is Venice, an architectural guide, and that's all it is. It takes you, that's a lot, but it takes you through house by house, building by building. The building where I lived when I lived in Venice is actually in here, as are all the others. And it just takes you through them, gives you dates of construction, current state, all that sort of stuff. You won't be able to find an old black and white picture of a weird guy walking a bunch of dogs, but nevertheless, it's the kind of Venice book that I tend to keep because it's so factual. It's not yet another bored Edwardian housewife writing up the current fables about romantic gondoliers and whatnot. Instead, it's something you can. I wish only that it were bigger. There is a big, oblong architectural guide to Venice. It's exactly like this, except it's bigger, it's in color, it's got a lot more detail, and if I remember correctly, it folds out for streets, for whole locations. So, I mean, I'll keep an eye out for it. I don't go to used bookstores in nearly the frequency that I once did. Perhaps if there were more cheddar in the PayPal account, Steve would do that. Perhaps the Patreon needs to be just a suggestion, just FYI. All right, okay. This is an Oxford World Classics, a mass market paperback of the Odes and Epodes of Horace. So this clearly doesn't belong here. I don't know what it explains this shelf anyway. This is David West, the David West translation, and that is once again a detail from a painting by a painter I love on the cover, Sir Lawrence Alma Tadema. It's not bilingual as far as I remember. It's just David West doing Horace. I have a bunch of those from a bunch of different translators. They don't always charm me the way they once did. So I'm not I mean, that explains why there's no dedicated classics bookcase. There once was, forever and ever, and it explains why they're scattered all over the place and why there are so few of them anymore. Because I'm not really as keen on those as I once was. Oh, okay, all right. This was an old series. Some of you, especially in the OGBG, in the Old Geezers Book Club, may remember this series. This is V Morton, who did a series of travel books called A Traveler in, and then fill in the blank, Rome, Paris, Europe, Italy. And this is A Traveler in Italy, a very old, they don't look like this. A lot of them have been reprinted. A Traveler in the Holy Land, for instance, I bet is still in print. And they don't look like this anymore. This is a very old thing. This is from 1964. And it is full of black and white photos and the author rambling about what he encounters. And I have a sweet tooth for them. I don't think I have any other Morton Traveler books. I've seen them all. I've had them all at one point or another. But I don't think I have any other except this one. All right. Okay. This next one is a wonderful, wonderful book. This is God Knows by Joseph Heller. The author of Catch-22, and so in so many cases, like for instance, A Clockwork Orange in Anthony Burgess's case, in so many cases when you have a monster bestseller like that just sort of happens to you in your career, it can warp you as a writer, and it can also throw all your other works into the shade, and that's a terrible shame, because Catch-22 is one of the thinner Joe Heller books. Something Happened, Good as Gold. These are incredible, incredible novels that nobody remembers anymore. And God knows, it's a later effort, and it is brilliant, just brilliant. It is hilarious. There are passages in here that put the comic passages in Catch-22 to shame. They are the well-crafted comedy of a much more mature author. There's also incredible pathos. This is a story of King David. And his relationships with the Mad King Saul, and with Jonathan, and with all of his wives, and especially with God. And it's just amazing. It isn't. I mean, it's a King David novel, but it's not a big galumphing, creaky thing like David the King, for instance. Some of you may know the gigantic, mega best-selling historical novel from 100 years before here called David the King, or a bunch of others. Malachi Martin did one called The King of Kings. There have been a bunch of others. And it isn't like that. It's postmodern. David, for instance, at the beginning of the book, comments on Michelangelo's sculpture of him. And that kind of knowing contemporary sensibility runs throughout the book. It's not flagrantly anachronistic, but it's very knowing in its position as historical fiction. In that sense, it's very much like The Kingdom of the Wicked by Anthony Burgess, only much, much more plangent, more multi-layered in its wisdom and sadness. Just an amazing novel. All right, well, here's another amazing novel, and also the same thing. It's the same problem here, in that this thing operates in the shadow of that one work. What happens to an author when they have that one work? And suddenly, everything they do is defined by that one work. In this case, the author is Frank Conroy, whose one work was Stop Time. Admittedly, an incredibly brilliant memoir that sort of cast a shadow on everything that he did. It got him speaking gigs, it got him reviewing gigs, it got him positions at writing workshops, including the Iowa Writers Workshop, and it overshadowed everything else that he did. And later on in his life, a great big, very personal novel had been brewing with him for decades. Later on in his life, he decided to write that novel, and it is toweringly brilliant. But Frank Conroy, you think Stop Time. And the book is Body and Soul, not my choice of title. There ought to be a moratorium on titles this derivative. But this is a story of a young piano prodigy. And it's a music-saturated novel, as Conroy's own life was music-saturated. And it's about that boy. It's about this boy who is a piano prodigy and who goes through life. He finds first one teacher and then another. He grows older. He falls in love and out of love. And he deals with his mother, who has severe mental issues, and it is written in a way that, if you're familiar with current year, with 21st century writing on severe mental illness, you will not recognize Claude's mother. You will recognize her personally because there is no artsy-fartsy nonsense in writing about her and the miseries of her condition. There's no nonsense like that, like the kind that utterly permeates the made-up stories today. There is none of that. You will recognize her because you will recognize immediately people like her that you know. What a book this is. What an amazing book this is. An amazing book about music, an amazing book about New York, and an amazing book about genius. But what it is to be a genius, to grow into your adulthood as this weird freak of nature. So, this is, I believe, a UK hardcover. I'm pretty sure that this is. I think the American hardcover looked much worse than this. And it's beaten because I read it all the time. I go back to sections and characters all the time in this book. It's one of those books where it's just so good that you revisit the thrills that you had when you were reading certain parts of it. There are scenes that I know really, really well. So that's great. That's two fantastic contemporary novels. For those of you who cavil that I don't like contemporary novels, that's not true. Not only have I read more contemporary fiction than you or anybody else that you know, including the handful of professional book critics whose job it is to read contemporary fiction. I've still read more than they have. But I also like a lot of it. The thing I don't like about the huge bulk of it is how gimmicky, opportunistic, and condescending it is. I just can't stand that. You're going to write a contemporary novel about a lighthouse keeper who takes in a girl who washes up on the beach, and he's alone except for his twin brother who works at a circus. I'm going to laugh at you. You're demonstrating on every page that you have no talent and no imagination. You write something with feeling, well, every year, at the end of every year, I do my epic Stevereads roundup of the best and worst books of that year. And there's not one but two contemporary fiction categories in that roundup. Not just debut fiction, but best fiction. Yeah, I couldn't read all that and enthuse about it every year if I didn't love it. Some of it, anyway. Anyway, well, I don't know where that came from. All right, this next one is also a novel, and it's also a contemporary novel, but I can't really say it's brilliant. I guess on one level it is. It's Meg by Steve Alton. This is the novel that unfortunately started it all. This is his novel about a gigantic phosphorescent 50-foot-long prehistoric killer shark let loose in the modern world, a stranger in a world she never made. and the publisher, who was this? Doubleday, made the very wise decision to simply quote from the ultimate blurb on the back. 2 words. Jurassic Shark. And this is... Meg is the love of my life. I have read all the others, but nothing quite captures the magic of that first time. Oh, great. Oh, fantastic. All right, this is an old... or actually not as old as it gets. This trade paperback has looked... I have had older versions of this. I grabbed this from a Goodwill because I realized when I saw it that I'd given away all my copies. This is Berlin Noir by Philip Kerr. This is the first 3 Bernie Gunther novels. A down on his luck, sad sack German police officer during the rise of the Nazis and during the Nazi years who still cares about justice and has an amazing instinct for observation and for reading people and for solving murders. And just happens to live in a time when psychopathic monsters rule his world. But that doesn't change his instincts, and it doesn't change his duty. And I love these books. They have their weaknesses, of course. They're very mannered. They're very noirish, but I love them anyway. I'm sorry that the author is dead and that there will be no more. Metropolis this year was the last one, I think. Unless his estate may easily farm out Bernie Gunther to some other writer. I can think of 2 writers off the top of my head, if his estate agrees to do this thing that we've talked about on this channel many times, necrofiction, where all of a sudden the author dies, but the books keep coming. If his estate agrees to do that, if they decide they want the steady annual paycheck, there are 2 people I'm hoping they tap who would at least do presentable jobs. Oh, wow. Okay, well, this very much does not belong here. This is history. This is a work of history. This is David Howarth, 1066, The Year of the Conquest. Tiny little thing. Take you an hour to read. And is fantastic. David Howarth is fantastic. He never wrote a book that I've read that wasn't great. Smart, sincere, but also completely approachable. And this is all about 1066, which is, one of those pivotal dates that everybody knows. There's 1066. There's 1941, a date that will live in infamy. There's, 1991? Date of my birth? Let's just move on, shall we? Oh, great. Okay. This is from the Center for Hellenic Studies. Oddly enough, because it doesn't seem that. This is from 2018. Old Norse Mythology, Comparative Perspectives. I really enjoyed it. It's very, very meaty scholarship. It's not, if you want to get into Norse mythology, this is not the place to start. Don't know why it's in this room, or why I kept it. I really liked it, but that's not good enough reason, so I will be going over this room with a fine-tooth comb in the new year, so I maybe it won't make the cut. Oh, great. Okay. Oh, boy. All right, so this is, it's heavily annotated, and it's inscribed. This is a fantastic slim book. Don't know if it's still in print. This is Carlo Ginzburg, The Night Battles. The Night Battles. This is about a hundreds and hundreds of years ago. There was a group of people that cropped up in the Friuli district. They call themselves the Benandante, the Good Walkers, and they claimed to have supernatural powers. The good walking referred to that they would go out, they would let their spirits roam at night, at will, helping people, securing good harvests, helping animals with their health, finding lost things, that sort of thing. Not evil, not witches, just the Benandante. And then the Inquisition came along and saw, okay, well, what is going on here? You're not evil, you're professedly good, everyone in your communities loves you, but you can't exist. According to our worldview, you can't exist. And you watch, as this is transcripts, a lot of the book is transcripts of people brought before the Inquisition, Benandante, and people who know them and married to them, daughters and sons of them, who brought before the Inquisition and are initially bewildered. What is going on here? Why are you so angry at us? And slowly, you can see their characterizations change into being witches, into midnight Sabbaths, until all this sorts of stuff. They were the only way that the Inquisition had, the only mental framework they had to understand something like the Benandante. And Ginzburg just unearths them and finds them. This is the author of The Worm and the Cheese, a very, very challenging book called The Worm and the Cheese that I don't think I still have. I don't think I have a copy. He's really good. He's really, really good. And a fun guy. Heck of a guy. Oh, all right. This next one is independent published. It's indie published. Once upon a time, I was the U.S. and worldwide editor for the Historical Novel Review online. And as a result, when I still had that position, I got inundated with indie historical fiction that I loved. I absolutely loved getting that. It's the one thing I miss, is I wish I still got inundated with that sort of thing. And I got, towards the end of that tenure, I got a strange 2-volume thing. This is by John Benson, and it is The Death of Shakespeare, a novel. The subtitle is As It Was Accomplished in 1616 and the Causes Thereof. And it's a big, thick thing. And it came with a companion, which is the reader's companion to The Death of Shakespeare. How thrilling to know that somebody's out there doing work like this without, given the givens, without really expecting any financial repayment, without really expecting anything other than the satisfaction of having a well-designed pair of books out and about in the world. So the novel is about the death of Shakespeare, and the famous story, the famous unavoidable story that he died after a titanic drinking bout with Ben Jonson and Michael Drayton. Despite anything that you may read in Jacobean studies to the contrary, I was not present at that drinking bout. I take no responsibility for the death of William Shakespeare at all. But this goes through it all in one volume in a fictional level and the other volume in a factual level. It's just fascinating stuff. And a tip of the iceberg indicator of what's out there that we don't know anything about. So I don't know anything about. Okay, all right. This next one is this is this author's second appearance in this room, even though he is not an author I like. And the reason you get that, the way you get that to happen, is if the author writes nonfiction. This is another example of an author who writes novels I can't stand, absolutely can't stand. But his nonfiction I tend to love, and this is Martin Amos. This is The Second Plane, with that utterly devastating cover. It's just a devastating cover. And this has his famous. This is a collection of essays, but it also has his famous quasi-fictional reconstruction. Yes, The Last Days of Muhammad Atta is in here. That caused a lot of controversy, got reprinted in a lot of places, had people talking for a long time. This is an amazing book. It's in rough shape, but that's okay. I didn't have it at first, so I was happy to find a copy to hold on to. Oh my. Okay, all right. This is going to be heavily annotated as well. Yes, it is. This is a novel by Peter DeRosa. It's wonderful, absolutely wonderful. It's called Pope Patrick. And there's Patrick, and there's his dog. And at one point, there are so many quotable parts in this novel, so many. At one point, Patrick is told, dogs might have a kind of soul, but they're very different from human souls, and he says, yes, better. And it's the story of a Catholic prelate who unexpectedly becomes Pope, and so unexpectedly, he doesn't go through any of the curious PR training about what to and not say to the public on any subject. Instead, he just talks straight from his heart and straight from Christianity, and straight from common sense, and it leads to one scene after another that are all just fantastic. Oh, just fantastic. I wish I had the luxury to read you long passages from this, because I don't know that Pope Patrick is still in print. I doubt that it will be again if it isn't. The scene, for instance, when he talks with a government official about the British occupation of Northern Ireland. Oh, he turns it on its head, and there's no way to read scenes like that or anything else when he talks about the horrible. This is, of course, written before the Catholic Church's continent-spanning sex scandal came to light. So it was written. When was this? 1980s or 1990s? 1997. So by that point, many lives had been ruined by that scandal, but it hadn't really gone public yet, and so you could write a fairly innocent fairy tale like this. You couldn't, I don't think, do it today. But oh man, what a book! How incredibly enjoyable. All right. Oh, boy, we're getting some contemporary fiction on this shelf. This is also fantastic. This is a great gay novel that I've recommended on this channel before many times. This is an Heiress Flight by Mark Merlis, in which, as you can sort of tell from the cover, the Iliad, the story of the Trojan War, is retold in contemporary times, and the son of Achilles, Neoptolemus, is a go-go boy. He's a gay go-go boy, and he wants no part of his father or his father's cronies at the war or the war itself. But then he is told, accurately to post-Homeric myth, he is told that his arrival at Troy is essential to victory. So he suddenly has to be involved, and it's beautifully written, and it occasionally is very mordantly funny, and I loved it. And I'm not just as a fan of Homeric pastiche fiction, which ultimately it is. I am a fan of Homeric pastiche fiction, but I also love it as a gay novel, and also as Fathers and Sons novel. It works great on all those levels. Okay, this is another great contemporary novel. This is John Ray's Lowboy. His novel about a heavily medicated and off his meds and mentally unstable young man loose in the city being hunted, desperately by his mother and a police officer that she enlists to help her. A very simple, very little story, but brilliantly done. Okay, more fiction. This is not exactly contemporary, but close enough for me. This is The Killer Angels by Michael Shara, in just what Jason Harrigan calls a reading copy. This is just a a ratty old trade paperback that I found and reinforced just so that I would have it. I don't think at the moment that I have a hardcover of this. This is a novel about the Battle of Gettysburg, and once again, like with Pope Patrick, like with Body and Soul, like with God Knows, I could easily just stand here, bounce here, and read you whole passages from it. It's that good. All right, this next one is also that good. Wow, great. This is by Susanna Dunn, who doesn't get the credit that she deserves for writing Tudor-era historical fiction. Everybody knows Hilary Mantel. Almost nobody I've ever met, even who loves the period, has ever read Susanna Dunn, and she's incredible. And this is The Sixth Wife. This is all about Catherine Parr, and it's amazing. It's amazingly good. Just, she takes a very different tone in her narrative. Her characters speak like they were in the present day, only roughly in the general context of the Tudor era, but there's no these and thous. It's very contemporary style speaking, but it's researched down to the last jot and tittle, and you get used to that. In fact, you come to like it. You come to like the way her characters speak and the way they view the world, which is very Tudor, but still somehow strained through modern sensibilities. And it's wonderful. I mean, Catherine Parr's life, her death, the exact circumstances of her death, just marvelously dramatized. And okay, and then another, I guess, quote-unquote contemporary novel, although not really. This is also a reading copy, but I grabbed it because somebody put a ton of marginalia in here. This is I always get, every time I mention that something was made by the BBC, 10 people pop up in my comments or on my email and tell me, no, the BBC didn't make that. Some other company, PBS. It says it right on the cover. This is the PBS miniseries that you really should watch. If you haven't seen it, you really should, of Evelyn Waugh's Brideshead Revisited. And I have a couple of other editions of this thing, but this has a sentimental place in my heart. This edition does, because I loved that miniseries. It's just so beautiful. And somebody, when they had this copy, they put a ton of stuff in here, all kinds of stuff. And I like to honor that. When I find that at a used bookshop, that tends to become my beater copy, because it's been loved already, and I like to keep that going. I have this weird fantasy that books get lonely if they're not loved. But anyway, there you go. That is, so Brideshead Revisited. That was a very fiction-heavy shelf, wasn't it? Okay, so that is this top shelf. Once again, this oh god, once again, this has gone very, very long. Good lord, sorry about that. It's unexpected. It's unavoidable, rather, with these library tours. But I'll wrap this up for now, and I will be back. I will bounce my way back into the library tour tomorrow. Thank you, BookTube.